welcome to a brand new episode of Smart Money, the show where we focus on all the top trending themes of the week and take up all of your queries. The big theme that we're focusing on today is the FMCG stocks and, in fact, the myth of permanent outperformers. Now, there are a lot of sectors that give you an image that they are permanent outperformers. FMCG is one of them, the buy and forget kind of stocks. But in reality, the data suggests, the price movement suggests that FMCG stocks are in fact at best just market performers, or some have even been underperformers in the last decade. We hash this out and take up all of your queries with our guest on the show today. Devina Mehra, the chairperson at First Global, joins us now with her view and to speak about this subject. Devina, thanks so much for joining us on the show. In fact, before I talk in detail about FMCG, about the stocks, tell us, why did you pick this theme, the myth of the permanent outperformers?
Yeah, hi, Sonia. Thanks for having me. Well, I mean, all of us, or at least many investors who come into the market, have this image in their mind of, they've all heard of some story of someone's grandparent leaving behind a stock that compounded X number of times. And they hope to leave something behind like that for their grandchildren. And they think there is a category of stocks that can do that. And those are characterized as having great return ratios, great margins, cash flows, and most important, predictable cash flows. So you think there is a category of stocks where you can predict the cash flows out into the future for decades on end, and therefore they are the sort of stocks that you can buy and forget. In some people's mind, they are also the Warren Buffett kind of stocks, because he has popularized this whole format, so to say, of how to scan for companies. And another important part being that they should have a moat around their business, that there should be some entry barriers, which typically is a brand that you're looking for. So you buy a business with these characteristics, you are going to surely compound over a period of time and make great returns over a period of time. We'll go on to see whether that actually holds.
Okay, so that's what we're going to discuss, right, in the next half an hour. The sector that fits perfectly into this category is FMCG. I mean, anyone and everyone tells you, you buy some of these businesses and forget them for the next 5 or 10 years and they'll give you great returns. But the data that you're providing to us today suggests otherwise?
Yes, that is the thing. See, I mean, all of them are great brands, often very good companies, but doesn't mean that at any point in time, if you buy them, you are going to make money on them. For one thing, of course, the valuation comes into play. And if you look over a period of time, actually, these stocks have not done well at all over long periods of time. I'm not talking like 6 months or 1 year, but 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, where they have not done well either on an absolute or on a relative basis. If you look at, this is the data. If you look at Nestle from 93 to 97, it gave a return of 2.5%, 98 to 2002, 2.7, 11 to 16, 4.7. These are all far below fixed deposit rates. In the 90s, I mean, people who are old enough to remember this, they will remember that FD rates used to be in the double digits then. Hindustan Lever, 93 to 95, 2.5%, 96 to 11. This is like 15 years, just a 7% compounding. Okay. 17 to 26.7%. So also, Gillette, which at one point was a very, very favored stock, 92 to 06, again, period of 15 years, 5.8%. 2011 to 13, 9.2, and 13 to 19, actually, it gave negative returns.
Okay.
Same look at Colgate, negative returns for 10 years almost. Then again, from 12 to 17, only less than 8%, less than FD returns. Britannia, 93 to 97, 0% returns for 5 years.
Okay.
And then next 4 or 5 years, again, 8-9%. ITC, of course, we know from 2013, it has actually been down. But even prior to that, it has had long periods where it was sub 5% returns. Bata, again, everybody thinks great company, great brand, has always done well. But 15 long years, 0 return.
Okay.
Page Industries, which is the jockey brand, again, you see long periods of underperformance, 5 years of 4.5%, Pidilite. I mean, the great Hindustan Lever has underperformed the market for a full decade, from 2001 to 2010. Nestle was a market performer from 2011 to 18. ITC, we know, has been underperforming the market for the last 6-7 years.
So why is that? Devina, why is that? I mean, if you look at it, it's interesting. You say HUL 2001 to 2010 at best, no, in fact, it's underperformed. Nestle 2011 to 2018 at best market perform. So some of these stocks, best-in-class managements, best-in-class businesses, they have a moat, great corporate governance. Why is it that these stocks have just not performed or even outperformed the market over the last 10 years?
See, there were periods when they outperform and periods when they underperform. That is the whole point. It's not an even thing. For Hindustan Lever, of course, that 1 decade was also quite poor on the business front. And if you look at the past 5-7 years, for many of these companies, actually the earnings growth has been driven by margin expansion. So, earnings growth has been running at roughly double what the top line growth or the revenue growth has been. So, you have to take that into account. And I think we'll come on to discuss what actually, where in your financials you can see the strength of the brand.
Okay. In fact, the data that we're putting out is an eye-opener really for many people, because we're getting a lot of queries as to what one should be doing with FMCG stocks. We have our first viewer joining in. Amit Kishan Chandani joins in. Amit, go ahead. What's your question?
Hi, my name is Amit Kishan Chandani, and my question to you is FMCG considered more as a defensive sector rather than an outperformer? Over the years, we have seen that it does not give the kind of returns one would expect. Also, is it the right time to invest in these stocks? If yes, which stocks would you recommend?
Okay, I think the second part of the question is more important, right? Because we've established the fact that this sector is an underperformer or at best a market performer. People have in general been very frustrated with names like ITC and HUL. But now, will the tide turn for the sector, Devina?
I was planning to address it a little later in the show on what the outlook is like. Sure. In terms of, what are going to be some of the pressures on FMCG. But Amitji, coming to your first part of your query, if you're looking for something defensive, then why not a fixed deposit? You don't have to be in equity, which brings, other point that very often people think of investments as looking at only a single asset class, which is equities. So there's no reason why you should be looking at, getting all the things you want from an investment and just, being defensive is a good objective. But then you should look at the fixed deposits and other fixed income instruments.
Okay, that's a fair point. We have one more query that's just come in on Twitter, so I'm going to address that very quickly, and then we'll go across to the challenges and the outlook for the sector. We have a gentleman who goes by the handle Them Perspectives. He writes, considering the COVID situation is still the same or even getting worse with each passing day, people will once again count their expenses and buy only essentials. Does that indicate that the share price of FMCG companies will now finally go up? And if yes, how drastic could that be? So, Devina, we are mapping, of course, 10 years and we're talking about how these stocks have not performed. But in the very near term, over the next 1 year, because of the COVID situation, do you think that these stocks could become outperformers?
It hasn't happened. If you see, since the COVID post-COVID rally started, they have actually been underperformers. And the other thing is, of course, is not the entire portfolio is of essentials. And if people really cut back and come down to real essentials, you are talking, vegetables and dals and grocery items, more of that stuff. So, Parle-G might gain out of that, but Britannia's biscuits might gain out of that, but it is not going to be across the board, because actually the margin expansion in many of these FMCG companies is coming from the more value-added products, the fancy shampoos and the more fancy foods, which actually people might cut back on, and they are cutting back on a lot of packaged foods.
Okay, so let's discuss what next, because we've chatted at length over the phone as well as to how, as you said, if you go on to an Amazon, then you get more recommendations of Amazon products rather than your other branded products like in Britannia and Amul. What next for the FMCG industry? Do you think that competition is going to become really severe and it could become tougher for them to sort of garner the kind of growth that they did in the past?
Actually, more than growth, there are a couple of other concerns. But before that, I'd like to set out how really what we talked about, that they have great managements, great brands, etc. How that picture emerges when you look at their financials, and you see that the brand, of course, gets them supposedly higher margins. And this has been very interesting because if you go back 15 years or so, most of these companies, whether it was a Nestle or a Colgate or a Hindustan Lever, had EBITDA margins in the mid-teens. Somebody had 15, somebody had 18, 19, but that was the range. Now, all of them are at 23 to 25%, which is the same kind of margins that their parents make. So, Unilever or a P&G, the global company, or Nestle, all of them have now margins which are about the same as what the Indian subsidiaries have. So the margin expansion story appears to be largely over, because you can't expect that the margins in a poor country will be substantially higher than what they are for their parents operating in more developed markets. That is one part. But the other place where this brand really helped them was on the working capital side. There is a classic Porter model of what the landscape of an industry looks like. So you look at the relative bargaining power. So this was a situation because of the brands. These manufacturers had great bargaining power because their buyers were very fragmented. Because the Kirana store, or even one level above that, the distributor, those were very fragmented. So you could actually get cash, or you are still getting cash from them, at times even getting money in advance. You don't have to give them credit. So these were big advantages. But now things are changing. And how are these things changing? One big change is organized retail. What does having organized retail mean? That number one, your buyer is more organized, which means your buyer is now, instead of being very scattered, there are fewer players, whether it's a Jio, a Reliance Retail, or whether it is a big basket. So there are all these either platforms forming or actual, buyers becoming organized. So it's becoming like a Walmart negotiating with P&G in the US. So Walmart obviously has a lot of leverage, and that is what you will find over time. The retailers here will have more leverage over the manufacturers, so they will ask for higher credit. In fact, if you look at the receivable days, for instance, receivable days for Nestle are 3-4 days, for Hindustan Lever are 13 days. They're all in this range, 5 to 20 days. Whereas if you look at the global companies, their receivable days are 35 days, 40 days, 45 days, because they have to give credit to a Walmart or to a Target or whoever is buying their goods. So same thing will start happening in India. So you will see that there will be pressure in terms of the buyer asking for higher credit period. The other part is the margin, which is what you also mentioned, that as we were discussing earlier, that most of organized retail would want to give discounts to their customers. So part of their strategy would be to give at a higher discount or a lower price, and part of that will have to be borne by the manufacturer. The other is the store brands. Today if I go to Amazon Fresh and type in Tata Tea, not only Tata Tea Gold, not only do I see Tata Tea Gold, I also see the Amazon own brand, which is 20% cheaper, and the look of the packaging is very similar.
Okay. So, we've discussed a lot of the challenges that lie ahead for the sector, but we have to take a short commercial break. So I'm going to do that. But when we come back, we're also going to talk about how the landscape has changed quite a bit, get some more anecdotes on what, global bigwigs have done with their investment bets in the FMCG sector, and a promised rapid fire round coming up with Devina Mehra as well. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, guys. You're still watching Smart Money on CNBC TV 18. We're talking about the myth of the permanent outperformers, and the sector on our radar today is FMCG. As you just saw before the break, many of these large cap FMCG stocks have at best been either market performers or underperformers in the last 10 years. We've mapped it out over 10 years, and there are now challenges that lie ahead as well. Devina Mehra has been speaking with us, and she's been harping on this point that there are so many challenges that lie ahead for this sector. In fact, we have a query coming in from one of our Twitter followers, Sugam Anand, who writes into us. He has an interesting question. He wants to know, will Reliance Retail, Tata Consumer, etc., who are making large strides in the FMCG retail organized market, impact larger players like HUL's business and profits? Devina, we were just speaking about this before the break as to how not only will there be margin pressure, but there's so much more competitive pressure in the industry as well. What would your response be to the viewer?
Yeah, I mean, I've already covered it in detail, which means that, I think there'll be margin pressure directly, as well as more competition, as well as they will have to give more credit to the organized buyers. So there will be an impact on the balance sheet side also. And there is really no room for margin expansion because, all these companies are already at the margins that their parents are enjoying, which is 23 to 25% of EBITDA basis.
Okay, so this regression to mean that you spoke about briefly, is it a global phenomenon? I mean, if you had to link it to the data that you have from companies across the globe, what does it tell you?
Actually, yes. I mean, regression to the mean, both in performance as well as market performance, is something that you see all across the globe. I mean, the one thing you all have to remember is that there is no permanent outperformer, in the sense that there is hardly ever a case where you can buy and forget, because all the time, you might hear of that somebody bought and forgot, and then this is what happened. But that suffers from survivorship bias, because, you are talking about that one success story. But if you had gone back to that time, there were so many other companies that you would have probably ended up buying, which have gone nowhere. I mean, even if you look at, let's say, the original Sensex list, about 2/3 of those companies are either not there at all or are really of not much relevance anymore. So that is the kind of, and these are, and Sensex companies, even when they were put in the Sensex, were all companies with decades of history and good performance, etc. So if you look at, for example, books which try to say that which are the companies which are going to do well in the future, and they do a lot of research. So, if you go back, there's a book called Good to Great, so which winnowed down from thousands of companies these winners. But if you look at just the 10 years after that book was published, out of that 16 companies, only 6 outperformed and 10 underperformed the market. And not just underperformed the market, even in terms of business and financial performance, they did not do well. Similarly, there was a book called In Search of Excellence, which identified 35 excellent companies. And thereafter, what happens, that only 1/3 of them outperformed the S&P, 2/3 underperformed. More importantly, 30 of them, the financial performance goes down from that point. So the fact is that there is no such thing as buy and forget. So the survivorship bias you have to guard against. There's another bias, which is recency bias, that you think whatever has happened in the recent past has always happened. It will help you if you're going for your annual performance appraisal. Make sure your performance is really good in the 30-40 days prior to that, so that your boss forgets that you did not meet your target 6 months ago.
A couple of years back. All right. So survivorship bias and recency bias is something that has, made you believe that FMCG stocks are performers. But what about Warren Buffett? I mean, he was the one who made the biggest bet, right, in FMCG, Coca-Cola. What happened with that?
That is what the whole story comes out of. Most people think of that Warren Buffett talked about this 100-year-old company with a great brand, predictable cash flows. You can't go wrong buying Coke. But if you actually look at what happened, he would have been better off selling it a long, long time ago. From 1993 till date, Coke has compounded 9 times, as against the S&P 500 itself, the index itself has compounded, has gone up 13 times, and Pepsi has gone up 30 times. So even the, what is given as the headline, great company that fits into all these criteria of being a permanent outperformer did not turn out to be an outperformer at all for a long, long time. I'm talking 27 years.
Okay, so if Warren Buffett can get it wrong, then who are we, right? I mean, just look at that. Coke went up, but it still went up 8 times. I mean, that's not a small feat, but...
27 years.
Yeah, but look at Pepsi, 30 times. Yeah. Okay, so eventually, now just to boil it down to the brass tacks, right? Would you buy FMCG stocks now or not?
Right now, I don't think that's the best place to be, definitely. I mean, that's not the place to be. But as in markets, there are no permanent friends and enemies. So one has to keep relooking.
Absolutely, absolutely. In life, there are no permanent friends or enemies, right? All right, let's go and let's do the rapid fire. This is our, our standard on the show. By the end of the show, we do a quick rapid fire with you. So let me start. Any favorite book that you want to recommend to our viewers?
If it has to be only one, then it is Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. I think that's like one book chock-a-block with insights on your own thinking fallacies and biases.
Okay, which I think you need a lot, right? In today's day and age where you spend so much time with yourself in this post-COVID world, you need to know how to think. All right, your favorite Twitter handle and blogger, and you can't say Shankar.
No, I had no intention of saying Shankar. The Twitter handle, actually, I like a tech handle by the HubSpot guy, Hiten Shah, because he curates a lot of interesting tech tweets. And blogs Morgan Housel, one feels a little envious that he's only in his mid-30s and writes such insightful stuff.
Okay, so I'm going to try and look up his blog, Morgan Housel. Interesting there. Since, it's Corona times, everyone's talking only about that, cases are rising. How do you de-stress, Devina, in this post-COVID world?
Same as usual, reading. I mean, that has always been my go-to activity since I was 4, I think.
Okay, all right. And we can see that big bookshelf there. What about in this digital world, any podcast that you would recommend? I mean, you told us about your favorite books, but anything you listen to?
Actually, I don't get the time to actually listen, but I get the transcript for this podcast called How I Built It, which is about talking to founders of companies or other kind of organizations, everybody from Ben and Jerry's ice cream to a tech founder to Tinder and Bumble and so on. So it's very interesting. I read the transcripts.
Okay, all right. Well, it was a very, very short but sweet and crisp session. Thanks so much, Devina Mehra, for joining us and enlightening us on the one sector which we think are buy and forget stocks, but the data indicates that it's not quite so. The last 10 years have proven that FMCG stocks are at best market performers, and many of them even underperformers. With that, it is a wrap on this edition of Smart Money. Keep sending in your queries, though. We'll be back here same time, same place next week. Until then, have a great weekend.